All right, let's dive into a story that's full of drama, betrayal, temptation, you name it. We're going deep into the story of Joseph and Potiphar's wife, straight from Genesis 39 in the King James Bible. And to give us another angle, we've got commentary from Matthew Henry. He was a theologian from the 1700s.
It's really interesting how these old texts still resonate with us today.
Yeah, for sure. We've got Joseph, who's sold into slavery by his brothers. Talk about a tough break. And he ends up in the house of Potiphar, who's a captain of Pharaoh's guard.
Not an ideal situation. But from there, things actually start looking up for Joseph. He doesn't stay a slave forever.
Right, he moves up in the world and becomes Potiphar's right-hand man. In fact, the text says Potiphar left all that he had in Joseph's hand. And back then, that was a massive sign of trust.
Huge GE. Potiphar really believed in Joseph.
And it even says that God was blessing everything Joseph did.
That's a really important point because it makes you think about how people viewed success. Even back then, was it just luck or talent, or was there this idea of divine intervention?
You mean like, was it fate?
Exactly. Was Joseph just lucky, or was it something about him, his character maybe, that drew that divine favor?
Well, it does say he was a goodly person and
Okay.
well-favored, so maybe he was just super charming.
Oh, that definitely plays a role in what happens next. Because Potiphar's wife definitely notices Joseph.
Oh yeah, she does more than notice him. She's got plans. She basically says, lie with me.
Not very subtle.
No, not at all. I wonder what was going through his mind at that point.
Well, think about the situation. He's a slave, dependent on Potiphar for everything.
For his safety, his livelihood.
Exactly. So to refuse her, it wasn't just a moral decision, it was a really risky move.
So was he really free to say no? I mean, how much power did a slave have in that situation?
Right. It's more complicated than just saying Joseph had good morals.
For sure.
And this is where Matthew Henry's commentary adds another layer to the story.
Okay, tell me more.
So Henry, who was writing in 1710, he reminds us that Joseph's answer, it wasn't just about avoiding sin, it was about understanding the power dynamics. He knew that even if Potiphar's wife was okay with it, the relationship would always be wrong because it was based on inequality.
So people were thinking about consent and power imbalances way back then.
It seems so.
That makes the story feel so relevant, even today. So what happens next? Does he try to let her down gently?
Not really. He's pretty direct and says it would be a great wickedness and sin against God. He even points out that he's in a position of authority.
What does he mean?
He says, "There is none greater in this house than I."
So he's saying he's in charge.
Yes, and he's appealing to her logic.
Like saying, think about the consequences.
Exactly. He's saying this would cause chaos in the house.
But I have a feeling she doesn't just give up.
You're right.
I know how this story goes.
Unfortunately, Potiphar's wife doesn't back down. The text actually says that she tries to seduce Joseph every day.
Wow. Talk about persistence.
Eh.
But it makes you think, could Joseph have done something different? Like maybe talk to Potiphar?
That's a good question. What do you think you would have done?
Honestly, I don't know. It's easy to say he did the right thing, but it definitely had some bad consequences. I wonder if there was any way to avoid this whole situation.
It's like his good character put him in danger.
Exactly.
And that's why I think this story is so powerful. It makes us think about the gray areas and how doing the so-called right thing can backfire.
You're right. Sometimes there's no easy answer.
And we all face those kinds of choices, trying to navigate difficult situations and hoping for the best.
Yeah, we do. Okay, so we've got Joseph in this no-win situation, trying to avoid Potiphar's wife. It shows his integrity, but it also shows how tough things were back then. But this is where things get worse, right?
Yeah, Joseph trying to avoid her just makes her more determined, like it's making her even angrier.
Oh, boy.
It says that one day she grabs his clothes and begs him to be with her.
Things escalated pretty quickly. It's easy to say he should have just left. But he was a slave. Walking out could have been seen as disobeying or being disrespectful. And who knows what could have happened.
Exactly. That's what makes the story so interesting. It makes you look beyond easy judgments and think about all the different perspectives.
Joseph was stuck between a rock and a hard place. So what does he do? Does he give in?
He doesn't. He runs away, but he leaves his clothes behind.
Oh, wow, that's a bold move.
Yeah, it shows how committed he was to his values, even if it meant getting in trouble.
But leaving his clothes behind, that feels symbolic, doesn't it?
In what way?
Like he had to leave part of himself behind to escape?
I like that interpretation. And those clothes become really important because Potiphar's wife uses them to accuse Joseph of attacking her.
Wait. She uses his clothes to frame him.
Yeah, she's angry and humiliated, so she's willing to do whatever it takes to get revenge.
And Potiphar believes her. You'd think he would know her better than that.
Well, the text says Potiphar was furious. Maybe he was jealous, or maybe he just wanted to avoid a scandal. Maybe the reason he throws Joseph in jail.
That's rough. He gets punished for doing the right thing.
It really highlights how unfair things can be.
So what does Matthew Henry say about all this?
Well, Henry points out that this shows how vulnerable even good people are. Even when you try to do the right thing, you can still be a victim of other people's lies and manipulation.
That's true even today. False accusations can ruin someone's life.
Definitely.
But what's interesting is that even in prison, Joseph doesn't give up hope.
Exactly. His character shines through, even in this awful situation.
He doesn't let it break him.
It's like his time in Potiphar's house prepared him for this.
Another test. But this time, it's not about temptation. It's about staying strong in the face of adversity.
Right. It makes you wonder if this is where his faith is really tested.
It's one thing to resist temptation, but it's another thing entirely to keep your faith when you've been wrongly imprisoned.
And it gets to the core of that question. If God is good, then why do bad things happen to good people?
And it seems like Joseph's response is to keep believing, to trust that there's a bigger plan.
Which makes sense when you think about the whole story.
We know Joseph eventually becomes powerful in Egypt, so maybe this experience is shaping him, getting him ready for that leadership role.
That's an interesting thought, like all these bad things are actually leading to something good.
So even though he's in prison, we know this isn't the end. But how does he get out? What changes his fate?
Well, this is where things get even more interesting. Joseph meets two of Pharaoh's officials who are also in prison.
The cupbearer and the baker.
You remember?
Yeah, they both have some weird dreams.
And Joseph is known for being able to interpret dreams. It's a skill he's had since he was a kid.
And now it's coming in handy.
It's like all those years of interpreting dreams for his family were actually training for this moment.
It's almost like destiny. You never know what experiences are going to be important later on.
Exactly.
So what do the dreams mean?
That's a story for our next deep dive. We'll talk about how Joseph's interpretations change everything, for him and for Egypt.
Okay, so last time we left Joseph interpreting dreams for Pharaoh's officials.
Yeah.
It felt like things were finally looking up for him. But how does this lead to him becoming so powerful in Egypt?
Well, the cupbearer gets his job back, just like Joseph predicted. But he forgets all about Joseph.
Oh no. You'd think saving someone's job would earn you a little favor.
It does seem unfair.
Like no good deed goes unpunished.
Yeah, but Matthew Henry says this is another test for Joseph.
What kind of test?
A test of faith. Can he stay hopeful even when it feels like he's been forgotten?
It's like he passed the integrity test and now he's got to prove his patience. If I were him, I'd be pretty frustrated.
It's a very human reaction, and it's relatable. That's why the story resonates with people. But then 2 years later, Pharaoh starts having nightmares, and none of his advisors can figure them out.
So even the Pharaoh, the most powerful guy in Egypt, can't handle a bad dream. What were these dreams about?
He dreamt about 7 healthy cows being eaten by 7 sick cows, and then 7 good ears of grain swallowed up by 7 bad ones.
Okay, that's definitely a bad omen. Even I can tell that's not a good sign. So this is where Joseph finally gets his big break.
Exactly. The cupbearer finally remembers Joseph and tells Pharaoh about him.
So Pharaoh's so desperate, he's willing to listen to a prisoner.
It's a complete reversal of fortune. It shows that even when things seem hopeless, there's always a chance for things to change.
So what does Joseph say about the dreams?
Well, he interprets them as a warning. He says Egypt will have 7 years of amazing harvests, followed by 7 years of terrible famine.
Wow, so it's a prophecy.
Yeah.
What does he say Pharaoh should do?
He tells Pharaoh to find someone wise and capable, to put them in charge of gathering and storing grain during the good years, so they'll be prepared for the famine.
So he's not just interpreting the dreams, he's coming up with a plan to save Egypt.
Exactly. And Pharaoh's so impressed that he makes Joseph second in command of all of Egypt.
Wow, what a comeback.
Yeah.
From prisoner to basically running the country.
It really shows the power of resilience and faith.
And a talent for understanding dreams.
And Matthew Henry says this isn't just a happy ending. It's all part of God's plan. Everything Joseph went through, the betrayal, the temptation, the prison, it was all preparing him to lead Egypt.
So even the bad stuff had a purpose.
And it reminds us that even when we don't understand why things are happening, there might be a bigger reason that we can't see yet.
That's a comforting thought. Well, this has been quite a journey. We've talked about family drama, ancient Egyptian politics, and even got a little philosophical.
It's amazing how one story can have so much depth.
And this is just the beginning of Joseph's story. You should definitely read the rest of Genesis to see how he handles his new role. and what happens when he meets his brothers again.
It's a fascinating story.
So that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening. And remember, even when things seem impossible, keep believing that there's a bigger picture out there.